a dlask experience.
So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about miseras nefesh. That's the main topic. Now, miseras nefesh is a father that has many different children. So, where do we start? Well, is it on? I believe it's on. It should be on. Yes, it is. So, where do we start? Um, just try to stay close to the microphone. So, for starters, what's closest to hand is, the Lubavitchers, Jews in Russia, specifically breaking the ice to go to mikveh. Now, mikveh is not a mitzvah midiraisa for a man; it's a midiraisa for a woman. But yet, men still very much worked very hard to go to mikveh every single day. And especially Hasidim would do that. Um, so, breaking the ice and going to that water is it's a very dangerous thing because the water is freezing temperatures, the kind of temperatures where you go ice fishing, you break the ice and you fish like that. And people who fall in that kind of water, if they don't get rescued, really fast, they will freeze to death. Hypothermia. It's not just the fact that you could drown. It's the fact that the water is so cold. You stop breathing properly. If you ever been to just even a cold pool that you're not used to yet, you walk in, you're like, oh, I can't breathe. It's so cold. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So
Those little kiddie pools we used to walk into
yeah, and you're
and back
freezing.
yeah.
And that's not even temperature cold water. That's just room temperature. Yet it's still very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and for a kid that's usually that usually doesn't care about falling or hurting themselves or cold water or all these things. I remember as a kid, that was like, oh, I'm out of here. I'm not
Right.
doing this.
When it came to going swimming in the pool during the summer, I was always told like, don't try to go in slowly. You just got to go in. And that's it. The point is that that water is not that cold. Yet it still was very difficult to get used to. I mean, try taking a cold shower. Now, it's not the end of the world, but it's at times that can be very uncomfortable. So, in general, I think that sometimes minhagim in Judaism can cause you to be more connected to Yiddishkeit because you're holding on to the things that you do just because you love Hashem and the mitzvahs. Sometimes when you just do the bare minimum, sometimes you can get lost and just see, why am I doing this? Um, I think this is my own opinion. I'm not sure where I got this from, but I do feel they do say like a minhag is in some way even more important than a mitzvah because it's kind of the flavor that gives to the mitzvah. Um,
The love.
no, but I don't know about love. It's more of the your own initiative. You're adding to it. Now, obviously, you don't want to go overboard with that. You're not going to start saying that like I can only do such and such when that's not really necessary. But there's certain things. For instance, mikvah is a holy thing. You would be purified.
I understand they would go with an axe,
Well, it depends on the water. Some of the time, it wasn't
pick
necessarily.
a nice pick.
Well, some of the time, I don't think the water was always necessarily frozen over. Sometimes the water was just freezing
Right.
without it freezing over. But
Right.
probably a lot of times it was frozen.
Right.
And what did they take? They took whatever.
Probably hard work to break ice.
For sure. That's in
Especially if you
itself.
have like a foot of ice.
Right.
That's some serious lake freezing over.
Right. And it's also if you fall in and you don't and it has a strong current, that could just take you away. It's very dangerous.
All right.
So, but Hasidim did this because they wanted to be, closer to Hashem and all that. Um, so yeah, it's a mitzvah coming from the person himself. Could you relate to this idea of had a minhag that that you do regardless, and you try very hard to do it, even though it's not necessarily a midiraisa?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. I would see so strongly this thing if we started in yeshiva or like a community. You said cold mikvahs, ice mikvahs, like here in Crown Heights. If you do an ice mikvah challenge for 30 days, you get into a raffle for like
I would
a
not.
set of costs for it.
Okay, no. I wouldn't do that because it's not a healthy thing to be doing. I'm just saying with Miseras Nefesh, you realize
It's very healthy to do cold showers, do cold dunk.
right, but not 40 degrees below. We're not.
40 ice,
I wouldn't. I
like
wouldn't do
freezing.
that. Okay, but that's not what I'm
You
getting
wouldn't
at.
do it for $1,000 prize?
Maybe I would, but that's not where I'm getting at. I'm getting at more of the idea of adding to the mitzvah.
Adding to the mitzvah would be like I don't know, when I was in the store trying to pick a Monera
Yeah.
past Hanukkah, they had all different types, and like honestly, it's like pretty big differences in pricing. It's not like it's a $1 difference, $1 more expensive if you get like the more Mahudar beeswax or whatever. We're talking like $10 to like 50 cents candle
Right.
difference. And I did it. I remember I was like in a vibe, and I just said like I want to do it. I don't really care. Also, S rig also.
Right. Sometimes, if you want to appreciate something, you have to just put little bit more into it. Like for instance, when people are buying a phone, why do they buy certain phones and not the other ones? Technically, just get the most blandest phone that doesn't have any. Just get exactly what you need.
Yeah, Motorola, $150.
Why? Because people want. Obviously, this is the Havdalah. It's a totally different concept. But the idea is that you want to get the best when you're buying tefillin for your son. Um, you try to get the best one you can.
Right.
You're not going to get your son like oh, get the cheapest one because I can't afford it. No matter how much it's going to cost, you're going to try to get him the best one.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be like mango leather. It's not even gonna be real.
Right. Um, okay. So, as we know, there are different times in history where Jews had Mesiras Nefesh. Now, um, moving on to the time of the Spanish Inquisition, Jews would work very hard to have the Seder, and the Inquisition was very much aware of this that time of year. They would be looking out for that.
Hmm.
Same way in other parts of Europe, they used to during this time of year, close to Pesach, they would start planning their blood libels, which is a different thing entirely.
I feel like non-Jews also have Mesiras Nefesh to really go out and hunt Jews.
That's not true because it's instinctual.
Or actually, it's the opposite. They have Mesiras Nefesh to not hunt the Jews.
Now that makes more sense because there's a lot of very holy non-Jews called Chasidei Umasailam who would go out of their way to save Jews.
Right.
Because, as far as I know, Asaph Sainias Yaakov, which means the non-Jews are just naturally they have a hate towards Yaakov. Why is that? I don't know. It's just what it says. So it's
Well,
something that
brothers are always wrestling. What's the big deal?
right. So it's something that's very inherent, and it's not necessarily their fault. I think I don't know. Maybe I should have just made it that way. But people who fight it are very holy people.
That's very interesting.
But I think as time goes on, especially nowadays, I think it's less of a thing because people are looking at the world more as a globe and less as a oh look at you, you're weird.
Huh.
Now there's pros and cons to that, but at the
How do you know
same
I'm not thinking that about you?
thinking what
Oh, you're weird.
I don't, but that's not that's irrelevant right now.
Is it? So I don't understand what happened in the Spanish Inquisition that they had Mesiras Nefesh, but they were hiding. Like they didn't do it openly, like in Russia. Like they stood.
Well, they didn't do
Actually,
it.
in Russia, they also technically
Yeah,
did.
they had to hide. You couldn't. You had weddings and stuff
Saying
like
you
that
wouldn't
hidden.
you wouldn't survive. Like
Right, they would take you away. The Spanish Inquisition is a bit more complicated because the Jews, um, actually on the outside, would present themselves as Christians, which is a very strange way of living because they're trying to. They're basically they're almost like on two sides of the fence, which can get very complicated, especially as the generations go on. The Spanish Inquisition spans 300 years. Imagine you're in the middle of that. I don't know after the first 100 years, and you're just like, what's going on? Am I Christian? Am I Jewish? Who am I? So there's definitely a lot of miseras nefesh because also don't forget that in the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition, Jews were given a choice. You could either leave or you could stay, but you have to convert. Now, if they wanted to leave, they weren't going to leave with a nice party with all their stuff and all the riches coming with them. They have to leave everything behind. Basically, leave
Like in
as
Ukraine right now.
I'm not so learned on what's going on over there, but
But they have to basically leave their houses.
they have to leave everything. It's a little bit different because this is a very this is
Well, I'm just saying, like property wise, like they have to leave
right,
go of their property.
right. So it's very hard, especially in those days, to leave go of millions of dollars. As far as I know, a lot of Jews were very wealthy in Spain, and to give that up and to just go into poverty is
They own
very
land, probably, right?
yeah, yeah. Own land, very.
Farmers, maybe.
They were as far as I know, Jews in Spain were very respected and had a lot. It's a hard thing to just give up. Now, if you're not to put down anybody else who didn't have a lot of money, but somebody who's just kind of like on the go and is just kind of like the old man with the stick, it's a little bit easier to go. But when you have a whole family and a whole thing, and it's a big miseras nefesh to give that up, which is why some of them stayed and still try to be Jewish. But it got very complicated because you're going to church every single day and you're trying to be Jewish on the other hand, and you're getting confused.
Wow, it's a trip.
Um, but also, as we know, during the one second here, yeah, during the time of the Crusades, the Jews were also forced to convert at times, and I believe it was Rashi who said, either Rashi or the Rambam who said, since they were forced to convert, they were allowed to be brought back into the Yiddishkeit because they didn't want to be that. And obviously, it's hard to know what was their thought process. But when someone is just being forced, and it's very difficult sometimes. So it's the same thing with the Moranos. They're also allowed to come back because they were sort of forced. With regards to the Crusades, which I believe the first Crusade started in 1196. Um, do you know anything about this?
Oh,
Okay, so basically, the king at the time, he had a lot of these different people who would do different jobs for him. Guys between ages 18 and 25, something like that, maybe 30 as well. These were knights, and uh, one thing you have to understand is knights are not these beautiful, shiny armor guys that they talk about in movies and stuff. These guys are ruthless, terrible people who you give them the right price, they'll kill the right person or whatever. These people aren't what they call chivalry and full of honor. These guys are just, these are really,
barbarians.
these are very barbaric men. These are not good people. Obviously, there's out of every single bag of rotten tomatoes, there's going to be a good one. But at the end of the day, most of these guys were not good guys. And these guys are roaming around. And the king was thinking, I don't want these guys roaming around. It's not good. So let's give them a job. It's kind of like the kid who's like breaking everything. Let's give him a job so that he doesn't keep messing everything up. So he decided, let's make this thing called a crusade. We're going to go to the Holy Land and we're going to take it back from the Arabs. The problem is it got out of control, and instead of it just being those guys on the crusade, it became a huge big thing, and everybody started joining in, and it became uh, a big pain for the Jews because when they were going through different lands and they were passed by Jewish areas, they would just destroy the place. They also would destroy anyone's place, regardless if they were Jewish, and they were just stealing everyone's food and stuff. Just imagine this: they're just walking from, I don't know, let's just say Germany, all the way to Jerusalem. Like, how are you getting there exactly? They're just walking. And one time they just saw a goose walking, and like, oh, let's follow the goose because for some reason it seems like it's going in the right direction. And some of them just got tired of. It's like, you know what? Let's not go all the way to Jerusalem. Let's just turn back to where we live, and we'll just kill Jews over there because it's easier anyways. So they go back to
But Jerusalem would have been their like big party where they really would have gotten all their big loot.
well, like obviously a lot of crusaders did go to Jerusalem, but um, whether they made it there or not, they definitely desecrated a lot of Jewish places on the way, and they would force Jews to convert. Like they're just walking and be like, "You need to convert right now." So some people would really buckle under that pressure. It's not like they had time to think about it, which is why
How did it go from how did it go from Yashka doing his thing to and even Islam? How did it go from that to okay, let's make sure now that every single other person will either become this or die at this at the hand of my bloody sword.
right.
Like what did that shift happen? Like why did that shift take place? Like why didn't everyone just do their thing? Like why did it become like a we're gonna
Well,
kill you to do this
well,
like
in
this
an
thing?
ideal world, people would be like, "I'm gonna do me, and you're gonna do you," which is kind of what people are trying to do nowadays, which is still not necessarily working. But at the end of the day, as we know, we don't live in an ideal world, especially not back then. People obviously, especially when you're the majority, you're going to want people to follow you. You don't like what these people are doing.
You're
Just
saying probably because it was man-made, man wants power, so he wants everyone to be there for him.
I
But if
don't
it's
know.
God, then it's like
Right.
I
I
don't
don't know
need.
exactly. All I know is that there's different periods, like from the beginning towards the 1000s. There's different periods of how they treated Jews. In the beginning, Jews weren't so much being persecuted. They just they didn't necessarily like Jews so much. But as time went on, it went from just not liking them to like straight up hating them, and then once the Crusaders came, they just decided let's have fun. It's a bunch of hooligans just going all out and doing whatever the heck they want.
Do the Christians ever want to convert the Islamic, and do the Islamic want to convert the Christians? Like, did they ever wage war amongst themselves, or was it always like trying to get the Jews?
No, I believe it was them as well. The Christians trying to get Muslims to convert, Muslims trying to get Christians to convert,
Oh,
because they believe that their religion is right. So they're going to be like, this is the right one. What you're doing is wrong.
right.
But in Judaism, we don't go around trying to get people to become Jewish. Now, what we do is we go out to find Jews who don't live a Jewish lifestyle and try to give them the information. Sometimes people who are not Jewish are like, "Oh, I like this," and then they work hard, they become Jewish. But obviously, it's not a simple thing. The idea is we don't go around being like, "Be Jewish, it will hurt you." Maybe we should. I'm not just kidding.
I mean, unless you throw a Monera set at their heads, then
Right.
I doubt then.
But yeah, in general, hating Jews is always it's always a very difficult topic because it's definitely been around for a long time. Um, for instance, during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, the Jews always had their enemies. There's always the Plishtim. There's always the Babylonians. There's always these people who want to just hurt Jews. Um, what's the reason for that? Well, it's just the way Hashem made the world. Now, obviously, that's a cop out answer, but I also don't really know the answer, so that's just part of it that I'm giving. Um, you want to shed some light
On, on.
on the idea of Jew hating? One second. Let me go get the book. Let me find it. Shedding some light on the idea of anti-Semitism. Well, for starters, anti-Semitism is a more modern word that came on later on. So it's not necessarily the right word. There's a lot more um, Jew hating, and there's different words to use, but
I think it's a lesson. My dad one time told me when I was getting out of the car to yeshiva, he goes, like with the non-Jews. I don't know. We were talking about non-Jews and like, things like that. And he says to me right before I get out, he says, Shalom, it's a lesson for us. and they hold us to a high standard.
Hmm.
And ever since then, I started looking at the whole, because then people were talking about Israel, what's going on in Israel. Israel was like a hot topic for a couple of years. I remember a couple of years back.
It's always been a hot topic, but some years it's even more hot.
Yeah, yeah, I'm talking like wars in the missile times or something like
Right.
that. And I remember with Mumbai, with the Shliach,
Right.
I remember like these random times when it would be like hot and people would constantly be talking about it for a certain amount of time. And I'd always think of it like the Arabs are like our Yetzirah. They're not evil. Like Snags used to think like not Snags. I'm saying like we like people thought that okay we're you could edit that. People used to think that okay we hate them. They are out to kill us. They are anti-Semites. They are
Who?
anti-Semitic to us, non-Jews, let's say, and and it needs to be put to a stop. Like there's no tolerance for this, and that's it. And that's all it went to. Like that's it. It stopped there. As opposed to after that discussion with my dad, it was like it became this thing of, oh, what's going on actually with my Sahara nowadays? Like, am I scared to stand up and say, this is my body. I will do mitzvahs if I want to.
Well, I think it's
And
also
and they're just spurring me on. I feel like the Goyim are just holding us to a standard, and they say that. And granted, and throughout history, you'll see Purim time and everything. When have we had troubles? We weren't doing Hashem's Torah mitzvahs. When we were failing as Yidden, Hashem sent us troubles to get us to do tshuva.
right.
It says it throughout Nach, you know.
Because at the end of the day, we are the chosen people, and we are the light upon the nations.
We're supposed to be.
We're supposed to be.
If we're not a light for ourselves,
So if you see non-Jews doing things that are below your dignity, obviously it's better for them to be doing more higher level stuff. But at the end of the day, you need to be a light for them.
it's your responsibility.
And
yeah.
then if you be a light onto them, they'll learn from you.
Yeah, and if you're not doing that, and you're also not being a light for yourself,
Right.
then what this whole world is just darkness.
Right.
They're going to be darkness. You're darkness.
But sometimes it's
That's how I see anti-Semitism.
okay. Well, it's not just it's we're mixing in anti-Semitism with miseras nefesh. So miseras nefesh also ties in with the idea of being lazy, especially nowadays. People, I don't want to get up from minyan and stuff like that. Or you have a job and you don't have enough time to daven, the right amount. There's all different levels. Yeah. So, what's the idea of miseras nefesh? And it's a mixture of things, but the idea that I'm trying to bring out here as well is we need to be a light unto the nations. And if you see somebody doing something wrong, especially a non-Jew, just be a dogma chaya, and it will help. Sometimes just being oh it's so bad, that doesn't necessarily help. But by you, for instance, if you have a little brother, sometimes just telling him off won't help. Sometimes you need to show him. You need to be an example that will really help.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I think real true miseras nefesh is. What they did in Russia or whatever, or like throughout the history, is that they they went above and beyond. They didn't just do status quo.
Right.
They didn't just say, okay, this is what it is. I'm trying to make things better and it's not working and I'll try again tomorrow. No, they went and like they really showed them. They really taught and they really were a light and they really went out of their comfort zone. They went, they did business dealings with the goyim and like they really went out and preached and did their good
Right.
things.
And nowadays, I think one of the main miseras nefeshes is to not, since we're so welcomed into the non-Jewish community, it's a lot easier to just let things go because you don't want to fit in, and you want to be, that you don't want to be the odd one out or whatever it is. But the idea is that we are the son of the king. We're the prince. You see everybody else, all the other, I don't want to call them peasants, but just for argument's sake, let's say the peasants are all covered in mud. You may want to you may want to go roll in the mud with them, but at the end of the day, you're the prince, and you have a higher standard. And even if they're rolling in the mud and they're okay with it, if they see you rolling in the mud, they're going to be like, hey, you're a prince. You can't be rolling in the mud with us. And a lot of times they'll tell you out, like a Jew, like, you don't belong here. You're meant to be in the palace with the king. So, yeah. All right, we'll stop here.